A single oyster is going to filter about 50 to 60 gallons of water a day. So, I mean, add that up in the course of a 3-year lifespan, what that's able to do.
We tell people that for every oyster of ours that you eat, we put 12 back over into the water next year. So it's one of the best things you can actually do for the environment is to eat farm-raised oysters.
So in effect, I mean, you eat a dozen oysters and you've effectively sponsored, 1 million gallons of filtered water. I'm Ryan Croxton.
I'm Travis Croxton. We're cousins and oyster farmers.
And we're here today at the mouth of the Rappahannock River, just as it approaches the Chesapeake Bay in the great state of Virginia.
Rappahannock means where the tide ebbs and flows.
And the Chesapeake historically means the Great Shellfish Bay. 2001, which is when we got into the business, it was the absolute low for the Chesapeake Bay. I think we harvested about 21,000 bushels versus the 20 million bushels we were doing in 1880s. And that's what we started with, was the bay at its absolute low. That means there was absolutely no industry to support. So when we got back into this, you were basically reinventing an industry that was, long since gone. There weren't trucks. There was no infrastructure to move oysters because there weren't oysters.
We didn't even have an idea of actually starting a business. It was just, let's do this to kind of resurrect the memory of our grandfather. And as we got into it, we learned that we had a chance to actually resurrect the Chesapeake.
When we came into oysters back in 2001 and we were starting to do our investigation, the conversation of the day was really around, one, putting the native species on the endangered species list. That's how bad it had gotten. And then two, there was talk about introducing a non-native species. At no point did we ever feel like introducing a non-native species was the right step. And call us nostalgic because we were holding on to our great-grandfather and grandfather's oyster company, but it was also, it just felt like we hadn't exhausted all the hope that could be had for the native species. Aquaculture hadn't been tried, on scale. We try and teach people that aquaculture comes in various shades, and this is one of those rare instances where aquaculture is really a good word. And the reason is because the way we grow our oysters is using the natural process. We use the natural waters. Our cultured product grows right next to a wild product. It eats the same food. It lives in the same environment. The only thing that's different is that it's literally in a cage. And since they're, inert animals, it's not like we're prohibiting them from free range. They're going to stay still no matter where they are. So this actually gives them better access to food. So the benefit of aquaculture versus wild harvest is that we're not dredging the bottom, scraping up the bottom, tearing up grasses, pulling all kinds of bycatch. We're able to grow these in cages that have feet on them that actually elevate them from the bottom, so it keeps them out of the mud where they get clearer water to be able to filter. And they're also just not going to have that grit in them that they would otherwise. And when we go to extract them to actually harvest, we're not damaging anything to get them out. We literally just lift them up and we're able to work the cage and put the cage back. So the Chesapeake, we were able to actually rescue the native oyster before we lost the wild populations. And today there are really only 2 wild populations left in the world where you can still harvest wild. And that's the Gulf of Mexico and the Chesapeake Bay.
We had to kind of help lead the wave, we call it the oyster renaissance of the Chesapeake Bay. And we're happy to actually say that right now there's probably like a couple hundred oyster companies doing what we do, which is fantastic because more oysters in the bay, a cleaner bay, a better bay for everybody.